The national dairy industry is in crisis right now. Prices for all classes of milk are at an all-time low due to oversupply and drastically lowered exports. Inventories are up and prices are below production cost. Tom Van Nortwick is owner and publisher of Agribusiness Publications based in Fresno. His company has published a dairy magazine for 35 years. He was closely involved with hundreds of dairy producers from 2009 through June 2014 in the organization and establishment of the National Dairy Producers Organization nationwide. The organization focuses on keeping dairies profitable, especially when market conditions force down dairy pricing. Tom Van Nortwick.
The biggest problem our dairymen are facing today in California and across the country is that the price of milk, as set by the market, influenced by supply and demand, is actually below the cost of production. So they're making a hundredweight of milk, it's on the market for sale, but the price they're receiving for every hundredweight of milk that they make is actually lower than what it costs them to make it. And that's been going on for most of 2015, and now we're heading into 16 towards 17, and there doesn't seem to be a solution in play by anybody anywhere.
And the big question is, how can this be sustainable to dairies, which have over the last 10 years, on average, their milk prices have been under the production cost?
We're not sure. In fact, what we've seen, of course, is a huge attrition in the dairy industry. 9/11/2001, 110,000 dairy producers in America. Today, 45 to 60,000 milk producers at some level in the country today. So we've had a huge attrition as we've gone through nearly a decade of really high volatility, low prices for the majority of the time, especially the last 7 years. It's been extremely difficult. We had a wonderful 14, of course, when supply and demand were more in balance and there were not excesses. Our global sales of milk exportation were high, and yet all of that has now changed, driving the price of milk throughout 2015 to unsustainable levels.
Van Nortwick said that the survivors in the dairy industry, particularly in California, have been able to diversify into other crops for positive cash flow.
Whether it be in nuts of almonds, and of course we're going pillar to post with almonds in California anyway. And there was someone the other day that brought in the fact that, hey Tom, you might have to get used to the fact that California is more suited to produce these specialty crops than it is to produce feed for cows to turn into milk.
Van Nortwick said there is a way for the dairy industry, not only in California, but the national industry, to do something about these low prices.
The proposal that we make is all about a way forward. There are solutions that have been brought forward by dairy producers in this country who have been in their barns over these many years, have seen these conditions and said, well, what if we did it this way? And so when we formed the National Dairy Producers Organization nearly 5 years ago, incorporated in the contract with producers were a long list of recommendations that needed to be implemented. We have not yet been able to implement very many of those, and there's good men continuing that effort. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about most was the Dairy Pricing Organization, originated by Robin Berg, a dairy producer in Wisconsin, that gave specific ideas and recommendations as to what dairy producers could do, because we think the solution is in the hands of the dairy producers. We propose that all of the price volatility could be removed from the marketplace by dairy producers being market responsive with their milk production on the farm relative to profitable demand in the marketplace. If you make too much milk and it cannot be sold, the price for not just that excess milk, but for all milk goes down. And so picture a great big tank, and we fill up the tank every day, it goes down, fill up the tank. But if we push milk out the top of that tank and any of it spills over the side and hits the ground, then every bit of milk in the whole tank becomes less valuable. And so we've got to be market responsive. How much milk can we use at any given time? The big dilemma that's come about today is that the global demand that we were enjoying in 11, 12, and 13, maybe even far back as 10, was double-digit growth every one of those 4 years. As a result of that, when finally the producers mitigated their milk production in 13, it caused the dramatic price increases and benefit that we saw in 2014. Milk was at record levels during that nearly 12-month period of time.
Van Nortwick said, Unfortunately, there were some early warnings predicting another major decline in milk prices.
Unfortunately, what was ignored was that there were warnings coming in the first quarter, even a little bit in the fourth quarter of 13. But by the time we got to the first quarter of 2014, there were ample signs available to us that should have warned dairy producers, we're losing, demand is falling. Don't keep increasing the amount of milk you make every month.
Van Nortwick said this loss of demand was mostly global export demand, while the domestic demand stays strong.
We have sustained, for the most part, all of our domestic demand. Those numbers have not changed at all. But here's that tank overflowing, and because our tank overflowed, then all of that domestic milk, the price of it went down too. And so even though we didn't lose domestic consumption, we lost price because of excess milk production on the farm. Global didn't take it. How much did global fall? It went down at least 50% from the high of 17.5% of our total production. 17.5% of that milk was going global at the height of that boom. As the bloom fell off the rose, as it were, and that bubble burst, now we're about half as much of our milk production in the United States is going global. So we lost about 8.5%, 9% of that total number. What did it do? We had a 31 to 35% reduction in milk price nationwide for all milk, not just the excess milk that was going global, but all milk in America was reduced in price by at least 31%.
Van Nortwick explained what the dairy industry needs is a sure approach to increase prices to a viable profit level. There must be a dramatic decrease of milk in the tank, or there are other ways to tackle it. Tom Van Nortwick says one idea is the buyback program, which donates the milk products to food banks and churches across America.
Robin Berg, a dairy producer, came forward and said, there's two ways to attack this. We can be market responsive with milk production on the farm, or we can go to the other end after it's manufactured and it's sitting in storage and the inventories are rising to the point that they begin to depress the value of milk getting paid to me, the producer. We could go in with dollars that we've set aside and saved, and we could remove that inventory, which the government used to do, which they should have never done, quite frankly, although they did create for themselves a resource and an inventory for an emergency. I still hope the government's got some emergency food somewhere.
Again, Van Nortwick said there's a plan that could be put in place to remove the excess with producer dollars,
to help maintain a viable, profitable price for dairy producers. Don't let that inventory, even though we've captured it, we've prevented it from spilling on the floor, because dumping it's not a solution. That's a lose-lose. Dumping is a lose-lose plan. Get it manufactured and be ready on the other end to help. There are 49 million people in America that are underserved, have food deficiencies going on in their lives all the time. Food insecurity is kind of the new buzzword. And so what are we doing about it? Feeding America, food banks, and church organizations across this country have the infrastructure to not only take it in, house it, but to immediately distribute it. There's a little church I saw over here in our neck of the woods, free food Saturday. So apparently they're going to have a food distribution at that location. Well, that infrastructure is already in place. Get them the commodities they need to feed this 49 million people. Have it removed. We pay for it. Donate it to them. They pick it up. They'll even transport it. They'll pay for all the movement of the products to where they need it to distribute it to the people who need the food.
And Feeding America is on board. They want to do it.
Our people have met with their people, and they say we can take all you can provide.